Hello everyone, welcome to THLGK. Today we are going to talk about one of the greatest sins we are taught to commit. Religious operatives, they teach us, although not consciously, to think about religion, about religious ideas, about religious structures in an anachronistic way. And they do that to manipulate us. Let's see how. As always, when you're talking about a word or a concept that's not very common, I like to bring up Google because it's always the go-to for most people to find a definition for. So here we go. Anachronism, and it shows the definition as something belonging or appropriate to a period other than which it exists or is portrayed. Something belonging or appropriate to an earlier period, especially so as to seem conspicuously old-fashioned or outdated. The action of attributing something to a period to which it does not belong. Basically, the idea is that an anachronism would be anything out of its proper time period. A chronological inconsistency where you mix elements from different eras together. And this is exactly what religion does. Because, as we talked about in previous videos, every religion, every sacred text belongs to the time and place you created. But given that they start so further back in the past relatively to today, they become dated. They would become dated if religion did not engage in the manipulation, deceit, lies that I've always talked about. And anachronism is one of the greatest sins we can ever commit when looking at religion. Because we look from the present and we impose the present in the past, in the minds of the past, the society of the past. So it's a ahistorical movement because it distorts history. It completely changed it, to be clearer. And that suits the religious narratives, these religious institutions, the the operatives, because it gives us the illusion that religion is current, that talks to us today. The best way to see this is through examples. So let me give you a few. You open your Bible in Genesis 1, the creation of the world, the creation of the universe. And that's how we read it. That's how we are taught to read it. That God created the world. That God created the universe. And since we are indoctrinated, since we are little usually, of course there are people who convert when they are older. Indoctrination is happening there as well. But the idea is, we are already led to this conclusion. But now, try and take a step back. Do you think people 2,000 years ago understood what world is the same way we do? Do you think they had an idea of what universe was the same way we do? Do you really think the people, let's focus on Judaism and Christianity, of Canaan, of Palestine, they saw the world as we do today? This is anachronism. When you read the text, you are reading thinking of how we see the world. We understand it as a spheroid. It's not really, but you get the idea. And then you have all the continents, and it's floating around in space, around the sun, within the solar system, within the Milky Way galaxy, within the universe. And then when you read the Bible, you read with that concept in mind. And that's a mistake. Because that's not how it was written. That was not how it was understood. Heliocentrism is what, 500 years old? Something like that. And even so, the church tried to stop it. They arrested Galileo. Copernicus was fearing for his life and only released when he was closer to his death. And do you really think that 500 years ago, if we didn't even understand heliocentrism, if a lot of the population thought the earth was flat, 2,000 years before that, do you really think they were with the same concept as we do today? No, the answer is no. They understood it differently. But again, it suits their narrative for us to understand the way we do today. Because look, God created everything, created out of nowhere. The entire world, the entire universe is the work of God's creation, of God's power. No, it isn't. Because the people who wrote it wasn't right. They were not writing this. They were writing something completely different. I won't go into much detail, but the idea is, if you look at the civilizations in the ancient Near East, in the Levant, they all had their creation gods, their creation myths. Because the idea was that the creation is not the creation of the planet. They didn't understand the planet. It's not the creation of the universe. Again, if they didn't understood what Earth is, solar system and the universe, it's out of the window. It's the creation of the nation, of the country, of the people. And if you go into the case of the Bible, it might even be the reconstruction of Jerusalem. There is a hypothesis there about Genesis 1. That's why all the gods in these regions, they created their people actually, right? Their nation. And they all had similar stories. Which again is another thing that's anachronism, because we're led to believe God is all powerful, but the gods around that time, they were limited to the nations they created. It's actually the other way around, right? People create the gods and they limit the gods. So the Egyptian gods lived in Egypt. The Babylonian gods lived in Babylon. The Persian gods lived in Persia. The Canaanite gods and eventually God lived in Canaan. This is the idea. So anachronism changes the way we approach and understand a religious narrative. And as you can see, it's in their benefit to do so. Now, let's talk about another example. One, let's say, less controversial. No, this one is be controversial. Let's leave the least controversial for last. What's breeding? See, we might not be doctors, biologists, but most people today understand what breathing is. You are inhaling air and exhaling air, but you understand that you have there oxygen, CO2, and the lungs absorb this and transports to the body. We have a basic understanding of breathing. We have a basic understanding of how the body works. The heart pumping blood, the brain, the processing center where we think, the lungs, the stomach. We have basic concepts of human biology. And we still have things we don't understand completely, like the consciousness. Now, what we are led to do is we pick all this and let's include here the invisible elements of nature, viruses, bacteria, molecules. We are led to pick all this, and when we are reading the Bible, for instance, we put all this knowledge in the minds of the people who are writing the Bible. As if they understood all these elements the same way we do. They didn't. Now, why is that relevant? Because there is a little thing they call the soul. And here I'm not claiming to be correct, okay? I'm just presenting a possibility. But now think about it. What's the soul? We see the soul as something that's inside us, right? It's not really something that can be measured, something that can be found. But why do we do that? Because we make them think like we do. So when the soul appears over there, you think, oh, that's not something we understand. Now, strip from them all the biological knowledge we have. They don't understand breathing the way we do. They don't understand biology the way we do. They don't understand microorganisms, molecular biology. They don't understand any of this. They don't even know it exists. Now, what is breathing? What is thinking? There's a voice inside your head. Or they say inside some people, not everyone might have. You see, when you strip that, you can understand why a concept such as the soul might exist. In fact, if you read the narrative of Genesis 2, God breathes inside the doll he made. And then the doll comes to life. There is no I'm complicating things because the idea of the soul does not appear in the Old Testament until the Greek period. So we're talking here 300, starting 300 BC. So before that, you don't have the idea of the soul. You don't have the theology of the soul. Because this comes from Plato, from the Greeks. But today, we are ready to read things as if it was present since the beginning. Again, it's anachronism. Even on things that they themselves bring, for instance, the soul. You don't have the soul in the entire Bible. You might have in a part of the Old Testament, mostly the New Testament. But the Torah, which was written around 500, only if there is a part of the Torah from the Greek period, you might find it. Very unlikely. So you see, even this idea that I'm trying to show how the soul might have come into existence is not completely coherent, because for Judaism, for instance, there was no soul. At least until 300 BC. Once again, this is what anachronism is. Now, finally, more concrete example. You see, when you read and we are told about love in the Bible, God is love, Jesus is love, love thy neighbor, and so on and so forth. Once again, we are led to believe love is this abstract feeling that we understand it today. I had a professor, and he was I believe it's auxiliary bishop, a pretty high position within the Catholic Church. And one day he said in class, the power of God isn't the power of canons, it's the power of love. So you see, this abstract feeling, it's the power of love. But when you try to read the Bible, the New Testament in this case, as they understood it, that's not what love is. Love is not a feeling. At least it wasn't. Love was an action. So when it says love thy neighbor, is for you to do for your neighbor what you wanted someone to do to you. So if your neighbor is going through a rough time, the commandment is for you to do everything you can for them. The same way you would want to be done to you if you are going through a rough time. So let's say your neighbor doesn't have enough money to pay his mortgage, to buy food, medical bills. So love thy neighbor means that if you have that money sitting in your bank account, you are not using, you are not needing it. I know it could be argued that even if you were, but let me be generous here. You should pick that money for your neighbor. It's action. It's not, oh, I love you, neighbor. God bless you. I'm going to be praying for you. Okay? I'm praying for you, neighbor. God will take care of your needs while you have all the capital needed to help them. This is why anachronism is a very convenient manipulation tool. Because now the present is shaping the past. Concepts of the present are sent to the past to overwrite what the text really meant. So here in the present, people can use religion in a more satisfactory way. These were only 3 examples. The first of an understanding of the text, when talking about the universe, the earth. The second, when talking about the soul, the understanding of a concept. And the third, the understanding of a word, the idea of love, what it meant, the definition, right? And you can see that they all change the way you approach and understand religion. They will understand the theological constructs of religion. And these are only three. There are many, many more. When they talk about the heart, for instance, they're not talking about an organ or feelings. The heart is basically the core of rationality, let's say, in simpler terms, where thinking comes from, where reasoning comes from. When you read the Revelations, that's the worst form of anachronism there is. People go crazy with that book. Absolutely insane. And Revelations is a book extremely fixed in the time period it was constructed. So you can have an idea. Revelations almost didn't make into canon. Because when they were making the canon, they were already very close to the Roman Empire, and everyone knew that Revelations is simply a raving lunatic. He was not lunatic, he was very rational, by the way, ranting about the destruction of Jerusalem and launching curses against the Roman empires and the Roman Empire, the Roman emperors. But again, they can't have that when they are part of the Roman Empire. So now you have this completely different interpretation that, oh, Revelations is for the end times, and these end times that are always coming. I mean, in my lifetime, I've been told about 3 antichrists. Every time a pope died, the new one, oh, that's the Antichrist. And then he died, that's the Antichrist. Oh, that's the Antichrist. Like, come on. But again, why? The anachronistic reading of the Bible. The anachronistic approach to religion, to theology. And this is the objective, because it's one tool in which they don't have to alter the text. They don't have to change anything. They only adapt what we understand, send it all back, and that already changes the text. If you pick the ideas of today and send to the past and read this, they had the same ideas, you've already changed the text, the interpretation, the original meaning. And that's the objective. So, whenever you are listening to someone talk about religion, whenever you are reading a holy book, keep that in mind. Always question, did the people at the time this was written, did they have these concepts? Did they understand the world as we do today, as we have been presented? If they didn't, you know already they're trying to manipulate you. You know already they are being dishonest. The professor? Why do you think he was saying it's not the power of canons but the power of love? Look, if love in the times of Jesus meant the action, the power of God would be the power of action. But because you look at the world and it's a freaking mess, where is this God acting? Well, nowhere. Yes, because God doesn't act. It's not the power of cannons, basically, of force, of action. It's the power of love, of feelings. It touches your heart. The power of God touches your heart. Now, the children with cancer? No. That God can cure. Yes, most of them will die. Yes, most of them will suffer before they die. Because the power of God is the power of love. Things got a little heavy at the end there, right? Well, I can't help it. You try to pretend reality isn't what it is, to manipulate people, being dishonest, being deceitful, lying. At least here on my channel, I will call it out. And if you've enjoyed the video, as always, please consider like it's like a nice transition, right? Consider liking, subscribing to it, sharing it, checking the other social media, mostly X at the moment. Thank you so much for your support, and I see you all next time.